Hi, I'm Craig Williams. I'm the host of Lawyer to Lawyer on the Legal Talk Network, and I'm here to celebrate our 20th anniversary.
Hi, I'm Bob Ambrogi. I'm the former co-host of Lawyer to Lawyer.
Hi, I'm Kate Kenny Nutting, and I am the producer of Lawyer to Lawyer for the Legal Talk Network. Happy 20th anniversary.
And in honor of that achievement, we have brought with us some old guy that used to be around, but not really. This is Bob Ambrogi. And I found a little bit about Bob on the internet. He's a lawyer and a legal journalist. He's been writing and speaking about legal technology, legal practice, and legal ethics for more than 2 decades. He's been writing a blog since 2002. It's even before we got started, Bob. He hosts Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. And he also writes a column on legal technology for Above the Law. He got started with us, way back in 2005, because you were, I think, originally a editor of the National Law Journal. So take it away, Bob.
Yeah, well, hey Craig, it's so great to be back with you. And yeah, I mean, we hooked up back in 2005 when Lou-Ann Reeb, the former founder of Legal Talk Network, reached out to both of us and said, I have this crazy idea for a podcast between 2 lawyers talking about things that are going on in the world. And here we are. Here we were anyway.
Yeah, well, at least with you up until 2018, I read on your blog. I'd kind of forgotten how long it'd been. It seemed like yesterday. But Kate,
13
you've
years.
been 13 years with us.
Yes.
And in that time, I read on your website, I was surprised that we won a bunch of awards.
We did, I guess. I don't I don't even remember what we did, but I mean, we were. I mean, heck, you know better than I do. You were the longest running podcast, but we were ahead of our time. I mean, I keep remembering our very first, or some of our earliest podcast episodes when we would have guests on, and they would have no idea what a podcast was. They thought they were on the radio or something. So it was a funny time.
It was. We started with the woman who is with us on the show today, Kate Kenny Nutting. I think you were Kate Kenny at the time.
I was Kate Kenny at the time. And then, 20 years, you get married, you have children, and it's, a whole bunch of stuff goes on. So thrilled to be here with you guys. It's been so fun. You're my friends, you're my family. So it's just always a pleasure being here. And we've had so much fun over the years. And Bob, we miss you, and we're thrilled to see what you're doing. And we're going to have fun today, just going down memory lane. And I'm actually going to start it off with a question. So here we go.
Well, we weren't called Lawyer to Lawyer when we started out. We started out with the name Coast to Coast. And the idea was Craig was on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast, and he was a little more conservative than I was, and I was maybe a little more liberal than he was. And we were going to be kind of talking about our coastal extremes, our political extremes. And I think as became kind of legend, the funny thing was that Craig and I ended up agreeing on everything rather than arguing about everything more than anything. But at some point, we were threatened with litigation over the name of the show. And Craig, maybe you can take it away from there, because you responded.
It was George Noory from the paranormal radio show Coast to Coast, who we were apparently using his name. I think he had a claim to it before we did in terms of time. But he had not copyrighted it. So we kind of wrote back and told him to go stuff himself. But Lou-Ann and Scott were both concerned. They were both news people from WBZ in Washington, or rather in Boston. And Lou-Ann was a news front of the camera person, and Scott was behind the camera. And they were a little afraid, I think, of the litigation, so they wanted us to come up with a new name. We came up with Lawyer to Lawyer. So there we go, Kate. That was it. Well, for me, it was COVID. And it kind of has a double whammy, because I know you're going to ask me another question later, and I'll give you the answer to that one. But I don't think we appreciated in November of 2019 that COVID was going to be as severe as it was, and that we would be led down the path that we were led down about it.
I have to entirely agree. I would have given the same answer. I mean, I remember being on a flight. I was out speaking at a conference on March 13th, 2020, which was like the day Tom Hanks got COVID and the Utah Jazz or something got COVID. You know, it was like this crazy thing that was all happening in the news all at once. And I got on this flight and everybody was panicked. But again, I think we all thought this is going to blow over in a little while and we'll be back to normal. And then who could have known? Not just the impact on society, but the impact on law and technology and everything else has just been tremendous.
And Craig, we were able to get a guest at that time who clued us in on what was going on, which seemed to be we kind of knew ahead of time because it was happening where she was.
Yeah, and exactly right. And that's kind of the corollary to the first answer, because
Of course.
when she came on the air, one of the things that she said to us was that she now couldn't return to China because what she had revealed was going on in China. And she said that on right in the middle of the podcast. And it was just like it's the realization then in 2019 compared to what we're going through in 2015 now with ICE and so forth is kind of frightening, actually, because of the two administrations.
I actually thought about this a little bit, and it's a really tough question because there are countless answers to this. But I was thinking about, given kind of the current political and legal climate, I would love to be able to go back and interview Earl Warren, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from 1953 to 1969, a somewhat conservative Republican who led the most liberal Supreme Court ever. And I wish I could go back and ask him, what do you think about what's going on right now, Chief Justice Warren? And hear what he has to say.
That my mouth dropped when you said that, because I have thought about it as well, Bob. My favorite, or at least the one I would want to interview, is Chief Justice John Roberts, which just goes to prove, how much we think alike. I wanted to ask him, what does he think of the mess that he's made? And it's a question that I think needs to be asked, but I don't know that he'd be able to answer it because I don't think he views it as a mess.
Yeah, I don't know that he views it as a mess either. And although I do think he's got to be worrying about his legacy a little bit at this point. And it would be interesting to see maybe after he's off the court what he might say about all this.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me the most is just overturning precedent. And the hardest thing to do is advising clients about that. It's so difficult to be able to say what the status of the law is or what it will be. And why not bring a challenge? Because you never know. I still think COVID.
Yeah.
I would have to pin that because there was so much disinformation and misinformation about it. We were being told one thing by the government. We were being told one thing by the doctors. There were people in the streets who were flaunting it, and we lost so many lives as a consequence of it. I was thinking, we did that series, Kate, on the life of a lawyer from start to finish as one of the things that Lawyer to Lawyer has done. I read an article about the top 20 disasters in the world, the things that have led to people's, and one of them is the Black Plague. Of course, 7 million people died or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It would be interesting to do a series of shows on the potential for those things happening again and what the consequences would be.
I would just like to throw in, for me, just, in research and, topics that emotionally hit you, I would have to say the immigration and the mass deportations, for me, just seeing what's going on now. It's a topic that, is a heartbreaking one. And those are the challenging ones for me when, you have these guests on who see it in their friends and their family getting taken away with no due process. And that's just pretty tough, especially in a country where, the Constitution grants that. So that's that for me.
Boston is a tough place right now for ICE to come into. I mean, they were the ones that threw tea overboard. And as my wife said earlier this morning, Fighting Irish is not just a nickname.
That is true.
But they are here. Unfortunately, ICE is here in Massachusetts and doing its dirty stuff, unfortunately.
It has done its thing in California as well.
Yep.
Frightening
times.
It is frightening times.
There was an article that The Guardian posted today about a journalist, I think he's in Atlanta, who's in ICE custody and has been for 2 months. All charges against him have been dropped, and the argument from ICE is that he's a danger to the community because he live streams and broadcasts law enforcement events. To me, that's just frightening.
Yeah.
That kind of an argument.
It's a scary time to be a journalist as well.
Counterintuitive to the freedom of the press and the First Amendment that we've grown up with. I'd love to interview the founding fathers to hear what they had to have to say.
I'm going to give you 2 fun facts. First of all, I thought an interesting fact was that given that we did this show for 13 years, I actually met Craig face to face 2 or 3 times, maybe ever in all those years, which was kind of funny. But I mean, understandable. He was on the West Coast. I was on the East Coast. But I think people thought we were, close buddies who saw each other all the time. And unfortunately, that wasn't true. The other, I think, one of my funny memories from the show is just how often either Craig or I were scrambling from some weird place to get connected and get online in time to actually record the show. I remember once being up at Acadia National Park in Maine, trying to get a cells connection or a Wi-Fi connection. And I think it was as I recall, it was particularly critical that week because Craig was away and I was the only one who was going to be able to host it. And I actually drove to the top of Cadillac Mountain, which is the mountain in Acadia National Park, just trying to get enough of a connection signal to be able to get on. And it was like a minute before we were supposed to start, I finally got the signal and finally connected in.
Well, and Kate, I want to also point out here that this is the first Lawyer to Lawyer that has gone on video with our guests. Our first broadcast, and it's suitable that our first video broadcast is back with Bob.
I love it.
Oh yeah, I gotta do video.
I think the story is the one where Bob and I interviewed and you found him, Kate, the lawyer who was out of a job and selling furniture.
Yes. Paul Semenza.
And we put him on our show. We talked about him, and then he came back and told us he got a job. And to me, that was just one of the most fantastic uses of a podcast, that we got this guy back on his feet and back practicing law again. Yeah,
I was buying furniture for my, bachelorette apartment. And I stumbled upon him, and we just started talking. And what a sweet guy. But you know what? At that time, it was the recession, and everybody was out of job, and he had to do whatever he had to do to provide for his family. And we put that out there as a piece, and someone heard, and he was able to get a job that year. So now that's magic of podcasting, and that's a great one. That's a great one.
Does my answer have to be a lawyer to lawyer related one?
No, go ahead.
My most ridiculous story, it was actually kind of a little bit tragic and ridiculous. This goes way back, but I discovered that a legal tech founder who had been kind of the toast of the town, he'd actually even been selected to be on Shark Tank. He'd gotten all these awards. I found out he had been impersonating a lawyer, had swindled 2 clients out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I reported it. And it became this story that just kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder over the years, to where I kept writing about him. It turned out he later got accused of trying to bribe several big city mayors. He then wrote this book in which he claimed to be an FBI mole through all this time. And in his book, he had a whole section about me, and my blog posts about him, and how I caused him to lose this major deal he was about to enter into with LegalZoom, to get acquired by LegalZoom. LegalZoom denied that ever happened at all. But this guy is currently serving time in federal prison for fraud. if only I could remember back 20 years, that would be great. But no, I do remember. I mean, I was really excited because I thought we were on the cusp of this sort of new cutting. I mean, podcasts were very rare when we started this. This was not a big thing. In legal, there had only been a couple of podcasts up to that point. That Denise Howell had one for a while, and maybe a couple of others. But we were doing something new and different. So I was really excited about it. And I also do remember so much, our early guests, and I know you just had one of them back on the show, I think. I remember Mike Greco, who was just been elected ABA president that year. I had known Mike from the Boston area as a former Mass Bar president. And Mike was a brilliant, wonderful lawyer, but kind of old school, button-up kind of guy. And I'm sure he had absolutely no idea what was going on. I think, I know he thought he was on a radio show. He didn't understand what a podcast was. He was gracious in coming on the show, I think. So I just remember this both kind of excitement and a little bit of this feeling in my head of the humor of the situation of him not really knowing what was going on.
Yeah, Dean Erwin Chemerinsky was our first guest, and we had him on for our 20th anniversary edition. He was dean of the UCI Law School in Irvine at the time. Now he's dean of the law school at Berkeley. And we have remained in touch over the years, which has been great. But recording our first episode to me was equally, I think, as exciting as it was for Bob, because I had a very significant radio background when I first started on the show. I had done commercial radio, college radio, even high school radio. I was very excited to kind of get back into it. It was, for me, a good way to get a little promotion from my brand new law firm. I had started a law firm in 2003, 2 years before that. Seen some of the legal technology change. I thought, what a wonderful way to kind of ride this wave, if it ever takes off, of podcasting, which it has, and be one of the founders. I did do the research this morning, Bob. We are now officially the 6th longest running podcast straight out, and we are the longest running legal podcast by a long shot. I think the next longest running one is now from 2009. A lot of the ones Denise Howells that you mentioned, and a lot of other ones have started and fallen off, but we're still here. And thanks to Kate, thanks to the Legal Talk Network that picked up our podcast after Scott and Luann sold it, becoming part of the Legal Talk Network.
Good question. Thanks for asking, Kate. No, the reason I was because it was like the most memorable podcast episode I've ever done. And unfortunately, Craig wasn't there for it, but Lauren Scoletti, our former producer here, was part of it. But it was the one we filmed in the Denver brewery. We recorded in the Denver brewery that was adjacent to when Legal Talk Network got his building in Denver. There was a brewery. I don't even know if it's still there in the building, but there was a craft brewery. And there used to be these people who did a podcast of their own podcast called Foss Plus Beer. And Foss was free and open source law, and beer was beer. And they would do a podcast. They were all based in Colorado, and they would podcast about open source law, but then they would also drink a lot of beer and go to a brewery and record it. And so we got them to be guests on Lawyer to Lawyer, and we set up this whole recording in a brewery with all the Legal Talk Network people in there and mics all over the brewery. And they all came in, and we started drinking beer. And it was probably like a good hour and a half before we actually started recording. And by that point, we were all feeling pretty good. And it was really one of my favorite episodes ever.
I have to go back to the interview that we did, and you may remember it, Bob, with a woman who was the United Nations monitor of trials in foreign countries, especially in Africa, to ensure that they were fair and reported back to us. And she described to us some of the circumstances. You're trying dictators and you're being threatened by their underlings, and very dangerous type of a job. But here she was standing up and doing it, a single woman by herself on behalf of the United Nations. representing the rule of law. And to me, she wore a cape, and it was an amazing interview.
Amazing. I have one, and this is just in Bob. Well, you both might know, but F. Lee Bailey, we had him on the show, and I've had the pleasure of with Luann, Reeb, and Scott and Mike meeting him and being in his house on the North Shore and interviewing him about anywhere from the OJ trial to the Boston Strangler, and just what a mind. And in this one, we had him on. Whitey Bulger was found and arrested in Santa Monica. And Luann calls me. She's like, we need to get F. Lee Bailey on. And I'm like, okay. Somehow I had his cell phone number. I don't know how, but calls him up. Yep, I'll be on. I couldn't believe it. And what a show to have him on, and what a case. And if anybody here in the Boston area, we know who Whitey is and what he's all about. But for him to be, within, in California right near the strip of Santa Monica, just kind of in plain sight, all these years on the lam, I guess. And for F. Lee Bailey to come in, and like I said, what a mind, just remembers everything, just specifics, and, a great defense attorney, say what you will about him. And Bob, I don't know if you have any input on that.
Well, just that we had F. Lee Bailey on a couple of different times on the show over the years. But I mean, to me, the most amazing thing looking back over the years is just just in the 13 years I was involved. I don't know what's happened since. I mean, I know what's happened. I follow the show. But I mean, the people we had on were just amazing. I mean, we had Aaron Brockovich. We had Jerry Spence, again, one of the greatest lawyers ever. Yeah, Dean Strang from the when they were doing the Making a Murderer podcast. Remember, we had him on. Jeffrey Wigand, the tobacco whistleblower. I mean, just really amazing people on the show over the years.
Jeffrey Wigand was so special, and he would send me information, that day, calling up, just making sure I had all the information for the show. Very, very thorough. What a memorable guest, and I'll never forget it, because The Insider is one of my favorite movies, and to see what he went through as a whistleblower, that was very, very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, Bob.
I think we're going to see this current battle between Newsom and Trump really explode. The Democrats have been lacking leadership for a very long time, since Kamala Harris backed out and lost the election. It's kind of been a vacuum. Obama has stepped up in ways, but not completely. He's not really in the political fray. Our Democratic governors really haven't stepped up. But Newsom's new PR team trolling Trump is, I think, going to come to a head with this redistricting issue. We just did a show on that, and we're going to have to continue to cover that.
I'm throwing it out because I remember yours, Bob, was John Slattery, I believe.
I think Tom Hanks ought to play Bob.
Okay. Okay.
He's going to have to color his hair.
Craig, who would play you?
Kenneth Branagh.
Oh, good one.
That's actually a good one.
Well, I say that only because I get mistaken for his when I had shorter hair, or my hair was not as long as it is now. I would get mistaken for him once in a while. People now think I'm Willie Nelson with my long hair. So
I just saw Willie. You can do a little Willie too.
Willie's
what was
the
the story, Craig, about you once you were in Australia or something, and somebody came up to you and said, "Don't you do the Lawyer to Lawyer podcast or something?" Am I making that up, or did that happen?
No, that actually happened. I was I had gone to Australia in I think 2008 or so. 2007.
Early.
Yeah, very early on. And I was in a bar kind of late at night after that tour or during it, and walked out, and somebody recognized me. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm in Australia. Who's ever heard of this? And apparently at the time, somebody had done some research at the Legal Talk Network and found out that, I think it was Scott, who said that we have listeners. He was able to track the URLs to the Supreme Court. We had listeners on the Supreme Court. So it's been really interesting. Kate has done a fantastic job with the guests. We had a guest from Hong Kong. We've had guests from England, the continent. So we changed our timing for that. So it's been a real wild ride over the years, and I still love doing it. It's Kate still gets great guests, and because we've been on so long, as Kate says, it's much easier for us to get those kind of guests.
Well, that's all I have, guys. This has been so fun, and I appreciate you. Happy 20 years, Bob. You have your own podcast. If you want to, let everybody know about that.
Yeah, I have a podcast called Law Next. You can find us, just Google it, Law Next, or it's lawnext.com is my blog. You can find it there. We also, every Friday, do a live podcast, Legal Tech Week, with a whole panel. Joe Patrice is another Legal Talk Network host, and other people. We get together every Friday afternoon live at 3 and just kind of, it's sort of like sports talk for legal tech.
And over the course of those 20 years, we've done over 700 episodes. I think 586 by the time Bob left.
Thank you for listening to us over the years. We appreciate your feedback. Feel free to always reach out. It's been a great 20 years. Here's to 20 more, and keep listening.